Hello guys, today let's talk about the DCML pathway, that is the dorsal column medial lemniscus system. First of all, let's talk about the sensations carried by the tract. First is fine touch. Fine touch is, for example, if someone touches a cotton wisp to any part of the body like hand, for example, or leg. Then another thing is feather. For an object having such a small surface area to be perceived by the brain, you require an intact DCML pathway. So then there is tactile localization. Tactile localization is, suppose your eyes are closed and someone touches your right index finger. Now if with an intact dorsal column pathway, you should be able to lift your left hand and locate that particular part where you have perceived that sensation. That is called tactile localization, which is a function of the dorsal column pathway. Then there is 2-point discrimination. 2-point discrimination is when if you can feel two different points on the body, on the surface of the body, and we use a divider or compass for that, for testing that particular function. Graphesthesia, for example, if you close your eyes and stretch your hand out with your palms facing upward. Now if I write something, for example any letter, graphesthesia, so G, so you should be able to perceive that the letter being written there is G. That is a function of dorsal column pathway, that is called as graphesthesia. Another thing is stereognosis. So stereognosis is, for example, again you close your eyes and if I give you a 5 rupee coin, you should be able to perceive the shape, the texture, everything regarding that particular object. That is done by stereognosis. That is called as stereognosis, which is done by the dorsal column pathway. Then is the joint and vibratory sense. So now we know the functions of the dorsal column pathway. Now let's get to the tract proper. So now let's talk about the receptors for this particular pathway. The receptors are Merkel cells, Ruffini's endings, Meissner's corpuscle, and Paxinian corpuscle. Okay, these four peripheral sensory receptors are the one that relay into something called as the dorsal root ganglion. So the dorsal root ganglion is where all the receptors carry all the senses and they are relayed in there. Then this dorsal root ganglion has two processes: peripheral processes, which are the four receptors that we talk about, and then there is a central process. So the central process will bring the sensations inside the spinal cord, and this is called the dorsal column because all the fibers for this particular tract are in the dorsal part of the spinal cord, dorsal or the posterior part of the spinal cord. An important catch here is that for the fibers taking sensations from the lower part of the body, for example leg, are more medial, and they travel in something called as the fasciculus gracilis, or some people call it the graceful fasciculus. You can remember this. You can remember that lower limb, the sensations, the fine sensations from the lower limb are carried by the fasciculus gracilis by a mnemonic called as the graceful walk. Graceful will give you a hint regarding fasciculus gracilis, and walk will give you a hint for legs. So fasciculus gracilis carries sensations from the legs. Okay, so the fasciculus gracilis is more medially, as we can see here. There are no fibers from the hands in this particular part. So this is the only fasciculus in the lower part of the body. This is the fasciculus gracilis. Now we come to the upper thoracic and cervical level. So by this time, all the fibers from hand carrying the same sensations from the hand start getting into the spinal cord with the same route, with the same path. So they travel in something called as the fasciculus cuneatus. This is called as the fasciculus cuneatus. Fasciculus gracilis carries sensations from the lower limb or lower part of the body. Fasciculus cuneatus carries sensations from the upper limb and upper thoracic levels. Okay. Now let's look at the tract proper. So these neurons have come in from various parts of the body. lower limb, upper limb. They are traveling fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, and these are still the first order neurons. Remember, there is no crossing over at the level of the spinal cord, which is seen in anterior and lateral spinothalamic tracts. They are carrying the same, they are carrying sensations from the same side of the body until now. So they travel and reach the medulla. In the medulla, there is something called as the nucleus cuneatus and nucleus gracilis. So these are the fibers from fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus, which have reached the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus respectively. Now they synapse into something called as the second order, with something called as the second order neuron. These particular fibers are the second order neurons. So remember, till now the sensations are staying on the same side of the body, they have not crossed over yet. So now these fibers cross over onto the opposite side at the level of the medulla. This decussation is known as the sensory decussation, and these fibers are also called as the internal arcuate fibers. Please make a note. This is the sensory decussation, and these fibers are called the internal arcuate fibers. Now the sensations have crossed to the opposite side of the body. And now they travel into something called as the medial lemniscus. This is the medial lemniscus, which has the second order neuron. Remember, this was the first order neuron which synapsed with something called as something called as the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, that gave rise to the second order neuron. The second order neuron traveled in something called as the medial lemniscus. The medial lemniscus reached the thalamus, especially the ventro-posterior nucleus of the thalamus. In there, it synapses with something called as the third order neuron. This third order neuron traveled from the thalamus and into respective sensory areas, namely area 312 of the sensory cortex. So with this pathway, that is the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway, we have come to know that sensations, the finer sensations of the body of, for example, the right side, eventually end up in the left side of the brain. Now there is a mnemonic with which you can remember the functions of this particular tract. So the mnemonic goes like: imagine trying to unlock your vibrating cell phone with your eyes closed. I'll repeat. Imagine trying to unlock your vibrating cell phone with your eyes closed. You need to know where your hand is, that is proprioception. You need to touch and feel your vibrating cell phone, that is touch and vibration. And then you need to press unlock, which is, you can remember as pressure. So that was a small mnemonic which could help you to remember all the functions of this tract. I'll repeat it again. So imagine it as if you're trying to unlock your vibrating cell phone with your eyes closed. You need to know where your hand is, proprioception. You touch and feel your vibrating cell phone, touch and vibration, and you press unlock, that is pressure. Thank you very much.